To another development, the federal government has formally set 16 years as the minimum age for admission into Nigeria's tertiary institutions. The Minister of Education, Dr. Tunji Alausa, announced this on Tuesday during the 2025 policy meeting of the Joint Admissions and Matriculations Board held in Abuja. While declaring the meeting open, Alausa emphasized that the age benchmark is now official and non-negotiable. He warned that any admission carried out outside the central admissions processing system would be considered illegal. He explained that the decision was guided by the need to strike a balance between academic readiness and cognitive maturity. In the same vein, the Joint Admissions and Matriculations Board, JAMB, has fixed 150 as the minimum cutoff mark for admission into Nigeria's universities for 2025-2026 academic session. Let's get some perspective now from Professor Yomi Fawehinmi. He's an education consultant and a passionate teacher. Thank you very much for giving us your time. Let's begin with the reduction of admission age from 18 to 16. And the Education Minister, as I just read, talked about this decision being guided by the need to strike a balance between academic readiness and cognitive maturity. Wasn't the former Education Minister aware of this, or what would you say has changed between then and now?
Yeah, thanks for having me. Great question. Well, the question I would have wanted to ask the Minister for Education was, what problem is he trying to solve? I mean, you know, it's always important. I mean, because we have a Minister for Health who is a scientist, a medical doctor, distinguishing at that. It's always important for you to prescribe after diagnosis. So what was the problem that we're trying to use age to solve? Who are determined that the problem we have in Nigerian universities is because people are too young to gain admission? I really don't know what problem the 16-year-olds will solve. I've had the privilege of teaching in Nigerian universities for next year will make it 3 decades when I've been teaching in Nigerian universities. I have never understood what was the difference between a 16 and a 17-year-old in my class. I have not seen 16-year-old feel more than 17-year-old or than 18-year-old. And then if the idea is, I accept that there's a need for maturity for people to gain admission, so that it makes logical sense to have that. But we should let data drive us. So what is that maturity age? Is that maturity a function of age? And if it's a function of age, is this 16 years? Is this 17 years? Is this 18 years? Because some people will argue the same maturity to say people can't vote until they are 18. But we have seen countries now that are saying, no, people should be able to vote as low as 16, as 17, as the case may be. So some of these things, they're just, for me, they're just needless intervention. That doesn't solve any problem.
But there has to be, I mean, we say, Prof, for the purpose of clarity, we know that there are some people who are as young as 17 and they are adult as can be, but the official age for you to be said to be an adult is 18. Isn't that clarification necessary, especially when you have young children being pressured unnecessarily to get to a certain mark, for them to get to university, for them to quickly graduate and start life? And one wonders, what is the hurry? So one would argue that this is not such an aberration, but a clearing of the pathway for people to understand when they should do certain things. I mean, there are exceptions to the age requirement, I understand.
So again, the question is, what is the problem we're trying to solve? As anybody, I mean, think about this, and I want us to have a global view. In Nigeria, a 12-year-old girl gets married. According to our laws in many states, it is not a crime for a 13-year-old girl, a 14-year-old girl, a 15-year-old girl to get married. We don't have, that happens in Nigeria. The Minister for Education and the Minister for Women Affairs have not come out to say, this is the minimum entry for you to get married. But But and you know the implication of when a girl gets married. It has implication for girl child education. It has implication for the education of our own children. We're not insisting on minimum age for marriage. We are fighting over minimum wage for admission, which is a bigger problem in the scheme of things. And that's my own concern, that we have bigger fish to fry. We are having one of the highest rates of teenage marriages, teenage pregnancies.
Yeah, but Prof, it's not quite accurate. Just for the purpose of those watching, it's not quite accurate that it is okay for a 12-year-old to get married in Nigeria. It's not legal, is it? And we needed to clarify that. I know you were just making an instance.
I mean, no. So let's talk about legality and let's talk about practice. The data shows Nigeria has one of the highest rates of child brides in the world. That data is not to be controverted. There are also states that were slow to also pass their own child right acts that describe certain things like that. Don't forget that each state had to domesticate the Child Rights Act, and in some states there was a prescription as to the age at which a child should get married. Some states were slower than others, and some states did not prescribe it. We know for a fact that we had a whole constitutional argument in the National Assembly and Senate over this question about age for girls to get married. The point I'm trying to make is that is a bigger problem for Nigeria's development than the age at which children gain admission to the university.
All right, let's move on from that. Okay.
I teach in North America, and there are many universities that don't really care the age you want to gain admission. So what's the problem we're trying to solve?
Okay, let's take another angle, because there was a lot of announcement from the press statement that we got. The Minister of Education had wanted to increase the minimum tolerable score to at least 160, but school heads were adamant that the figure shouldn't be above that. Last year it was 140 for JAMB. What's your thought about this upward review, and what would be an appropriate number barring any sentiments?
Again, it's important. Thanks. A very great question. It's important for us to always remember that JAMB is not a qualification exam. JAMB is a ranking exam. The qualification exam is NECO, the qualification exam is NAPTEC, the qualification exam is WAEC. JAMB is a ranking exam. So JAMB is not to show whether I can speak English or I know maths or I know geography. JAMB is just supposed to rank all the candidates. Remember, if we had enough spaces in the higher institutions, we will not need to rank them. It's because we don't have enough space. So let's rank them and pick the ones higher. So the question of maximum, for me, I always ask myself, the question of minimum tolerable mark is totally not necessary because you are ranking. So, for example, and don't forget, it's a cohort exam. So this is the current cohort. I mean, if the results are so good and you say you want to pick the first 1,000, whatever that mark lands together, I think the problem with this minimum tolerable score is that we are starting from the back to the front. Okay, so every year, data shows that Nigerians don't fill the quota in our institutions. We have had years that out of over 450, 500,000 spaces, we have had years that less than 400 were filled. So there were spaces in University of Ibadan, there were spaces in UNILAG, and there were no students going in because we have already pegged the mark to say, oh, it should not be more than 140, it should not be less than 120. Why? Because it's a ranking exam. The first question we want to ask is that, how many people do we want to admit? Do we want to admit 1,000, 2,000, 5,000, 1 million? If we want to admit 1 million candidates,
Prof, what I'm sensing from
the first person, 1 million person.
What I'm sensing from your submission is that these are not priority issues that the JAMB and the federal government should be focusing on. But what do you think they should be doing now? I mean, last time we were talking about the quality of the exam, the issues with the automation of results and all of that. And now we're talking about some other issues about age and numbers. And you said these are no priorities. So what should be priorities for the federal government and JAMB at this time?
Okay, great question. And thanks for asking. This morning, ASU was on strike. the Academic Staff Union of Nigerian Universities was on strike this morning. While that policy meeting was going on, they eventually called off the strike later in the day. That is where you are taking people to. They are on strike. That is a problem. That is an urgent problem, an important problem that we should focus on. Why are you talking about admission when the people that they are going to teach them are calling on strike? As at the time we are having that conversation, that's one part of it. The other part of it is a question of compliance between me and you. You know, almost every year in the recent past, there's always been waivers and conditions removed for some people. In university that you have said minimum marks they should take is 140 or 150. If you don't have enough candidates, they're going to admit people that have lesser ages. That is going to happen because they need to admit students, particularly the private universities. That's something. Are we going to ensure compliance? And after some time, wouldn't they go back to the same minister to get waivers, which has happened at least 3-4 years in the last 5 years? Again, one question we need to ask ourselves is the question of the quality of education in our tertiary institutions. It's very, very important. Think about it. 100 marks was set as a cutoff for education, colleges of education. The people going to teach our children, we have said, they should be the ones that are the lowest in this ranking. To go to a school of nursing or a nursing program, we have said it is 150. Or 140. To go to a university, we have said, but to go to a college of education, it is 100. We are sending a message to a system to say the best of us are not expected to become teachers. So it is those people we are picking from that we want to go and become teachers, and we want them to produce the best people for us. So,
yeah, another aspect, as someone who went through. Prof, as someone who went through the College of Education, another challenge that people get is the delay with getting the right score with JAMB. And then they still find another way to get to these colleges of education. But that does not, a failure in JAMB doesn't necessarily mean that these people are not at par with, you know, the quality candidates that are required at these colleges of education. Again, to add to that, there is the question of, you know, validity, the period of validity for JAMB certification. So I want you to, as quickly as you can, in a minute.
Okay. Remember, JAMB is a ranking exam, so there's no failure. In ranking exams, you are not failing. That's why there's no failure mark, pass mark, whatever. What you can have is a minimum tolerable score. So it's not as if those going to education are those that failed, is that those that were lesser in the ranking. And the point I'm trying to make is that it doesn't help the psyche of those that become teachers if they know that society is saying that the people at the top of the pyramid should not become teachers. It doesn't help those people themselves, and it doesn't help the people who lecture in those schools when they know that among this rank, it is the ones at the bottom that they are given for us to train to become teachers. It doesn't help their psyche. I mean, there's this research that they talk about in education where teachers were encouraged and told and lied to that their students were the best. And these students were not the best, but because the teachers knew or were told that the students were the best, those students turned out to be the best. In Nigeria, we have told the College of Education that the people we are sending to you are not the best based on this ranking. How do you want those teachers to suddenly have the right mindset to train them, to train our children to become the best, for example?
I get the point you're making, Prof. I really do get the point you're making, but I had to ask that question because I know it's in the mind of a lot of persons to also ask. I wish we had more time, but we don't. Thank you for speaking with us.